to General Sir Richard Shirreff, who's former Deputy Supreme Commander of NATO in Europe and wrote the book War with Russia, so is well placed on many counts to comment on this. Sir Richard, thank you for your time. Level of nervousness this morning or totally comfortable? Good morning.
Good morning. Comfortable? No. Nervous? No. But realistic that there's not going to be a peace until Russia is forced into it. But at least now there is a clear plan from France and the UK to provide a reassurance force or an enforcement force. But it's got to be the right capability, and it's got to have the right numbers, the means, and there's got to be a proper and capabilities.
Well, that's an interesting point, because as a journalist, and you'll be far closer to it than I there, sir, but as a journalist, I read time and time again that, sadly, our military is being depleted. We might not have enough blokes and women in kit to actually do the job. How major a concern is that?
That is a concern. The British Army is and indeed more widely, Air Force and Navy, has been depleted. So you've got to work out what has got to be done, and then you've got to provide the means to do it. And at least now there's an intent to provide a reassurance force or get some boots on the ground, but it's got to be capable. And the reality is that unless Russia is forced into this, the assumption must be anyway that Russia will break any ceasefire, and so such a force has got to be prepared to fight.
Sir Richard, what happens if I'm one of the brave military personnel who's part of this peacekeeping force, and I or my colleagues are fired on by Russia? What are the rules of engagement?
This statement yesterday from Paris is pretty light on detail, and these are exactly the sort of things that need to be bottomed out. But the bottom line is also that if this can't be a lightly armed blueberry type peacekeeping force, UN style. It's got to be prepared to enforce peace, and enforcing peace means being prepared to overmatch the Russians, and that means also being prepared to fight them if necessary.
So we could have British troops firing on Russian military personnel in Ukraine?
We could.
That's got to make you nervous, sir.
Yeah, it is, but it's realistic that there's not going to be a lasting peace until Russia is forced into it and forced to accept Ukraine as a sovereign state and Zelenskyy as president. And thus far, we've seen no indication at all that Russia is prepared to acquiesce with the discussions that we saw in Paris yesterday.
Having served as Deputy Supreme Commander of NATO, Sir Richard, why currently is it only the UK and France? We saw the German leader there, we saw a senior representative of the US, we saw Italian. Why are they not joining in?
Well, the statement talked about British, French and partners. We haven't seen the detail on the partners yet, but I think we have to assume that there will be other NATO partner nations involved in this.
Lastly, reminding listeners you wrote the book War with Russia. How will this have gone down in the Kremlin?
Well, I don't think this will go, I think, like a lead balloon, because I don't think the Kremlin's prepared to accept, they've stated already they're not prepared to accept NATO troops, but it's not up to them to say whether they accept it. It's up to NATO, it's up to Europe, it's up to give Ukraine the support to force the Russians into accepting it.
Really enjoyed our time together. Thank you. Sir Richard Shirreff is General, former Deputy Supreme Commander of NATO in Europe, and wrote War with Russia, 12 after 7. Listen to that Mark Almond, who's historian, director of the Crisis Research Institute in Oxford, regular columnist with the Daily Mail, and regularly helps us with matters such as these. Good to have you on again, Mark. So reminding everyone, of course, that you're a leading historian. Recent history shows that past adventures in countries such as Afghanistan and Iraq have not gone well. How easy is this going to be to sell to the British public? Good morning.
Well, that's very true. I think the basic problem here is that we have the keystone of the arch being put in place before the actual arch has been built. And as you say, the British public will have a lot of memory of people saying that deployment to Afghanistan would be without a shot being fired. Well, I'm afraid hundreds dead later, we know that that's not how these things go. And there will be all sorts of people, primarily the Russians, as Sir Richard Shirreff was saying, but maybe even the odd Ukrainian, who will want to cause trouble in order to drag the British and French and then the rest of NATO into a conflict which they will think is to their advantage.
You've had time to ruminate on it overnight,
and
Mark.
as a historian, I would say, can you imagine the German public wanting to send German troops back to where they were slaughtered in the Second World War? We forget the Italians lost hundreds of thousands of troops fighting for Hitler in Russia too, and in Ukraine, one modern-day Ukraine. So there are traumas amongst our allies, historical traumas that we, in regard to this particular territory, don't have, but we do have, of course, the recent experience of Afghanistan, Iraq, and of Northern Ireland. to show how peacekeeping and good intentions can go badly wrong.
So, overnight thoughts, views, of opinions on yesterday's work in Paris, Mark?
Yeah, well, it's interesting and very important that the Americans have supported what the British and French and by implication the rest of the Europeans are saying. But the other issue that's haunting us, of course, is that on the other side of the Atlantic, President Trump has reiterated his determination to get hold of Greenland, which is something, of course, that will give great pleasure to the Russians and more generally opponents of the West, because it's going to split the Europeans from the Americans, or it will show that the Europeans can be pushed around. And therefore, if you're sitting in the Kremlin like Putin and hearing these declarations of a willingness to send a peace enforcement force, you will say, well, the Europeans don't seem able to enforce defending the territory of one of their own countries, Denmark and Greenland. Will they do that in Ukraine?
Lastly, do you sense the elastic band of NATO is a bit stretched at the moment?
Yes, indeed. Partly because ultimately Trump has shown that he sees all the allies as people who need to pay up, but also shut up. And the Americans, to some extent, say, do we need NATO as much as the Europeans in NATO and the Canadians need ours?
Always good speaking with you. Mark, thank you. Have a happy new year. Mark Almond, historian, director of the Crisis Research Institute in Oxford, regular columnist at the Daily Mail, regularly appearing here. Well, those are the questions set for you.